Maybe not. Now we are. Bam! Here we are, recording. Wisconsin BHA Hike to Hunt podcast, episode 8. We are joined by Sarah Topp of All Things Outdoors, Artemis, Michigan BHA, Gun Dogs, all the cool things she's got going on. Sarah, hello. Hello, co-hosts. Hello, everyone watching or listening. So we're excited to get into it. This episode is going to be about Lady Deer Camp. TJ has been on us to talk about community and deer camp. Here we are. Kelly and Emily are going to steer us down this journey with Sarah. Before we get there, though, just a little hike to hunt recap, see where everyone's at. We'll start with Anthony and the weekly challenges, and then whether or not Anthony is signed up.
On the spot, we start off. So, welcome to week 7. This week we have most elevation gained in a single hike with a pack.
Mm-hmm.
It's a value of $289. I can't really say the name. Stone Glacier. What is that? Sir Eck 1700 pack. It looks dope and it looks pretty expensive. So please do get in the running because I'm about to start cheating because I've been falling slacking. So you guys got to out cheat me or actually outwork me.
There you go.
It'd be too hard.
I like. Do you have a profile on the app?
I do have a profile.
Okay,
so I have the app.
So you're all right. So you're tied with Emily. I like it. Excellent. Yeah, I don't have no idea how to say that, but the picture looks cool. For everyone at home who's watching the video, I've got it up on my screen. Thank you, Anthony. Real quick, everyone, just let's send some good vibes to Ryan and his family. They had a little bit of an emergency today, so maybe he'll pop on, but otherwise we're sending them all the love, good vibes. We're missing him today as part of this team. So I guess with that, I can go next. I'm just chipping away. Same thing, dogs, bear hunting, getting outdoors, swatting the flies. I will lose this week. I live in a swamp in Stevens Point. I think I've actually had negative elevation after a workout. So yeah, this will not be my week. Emily, where are you at?
I was wondering, does the downward elevation count too? Because I don't have to like run up and down Ferry Bluff or something. I don't know. But I signed up last week and I had to do this with Snapchat too, but I had to create a new profile because I couldn't remember my password and I used a different email account that I no longer have access to. So my goal for this week is to friend all of you. And I can't get the tube sock to work, so I'm gonna have to hold my phone with all the e-collar remotes and stuff. So we'll see how that goes. But otherwise, yes, I did go for a jog this week.
Good. I like it. On the board. Got the profile. Kelly, where are you at?
I'm just thinking about how I get Emily a tube sock that'll work as her phone holder.
I've got like skinny calves, so you think it would work?
You must, but yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Now I'm feeling very self-conscious about my calves and arms, and how my tube sock works. But I'm so bad when in this heat. Like, I'm just trying to get out just about every day to do some kind of walk. Sometimes a run, just so I can sort of keep up with Bill and I'm not keeping up by any stretch of the imagination and keep up with anybody else who's participating. But that's all I have to say about it. I'll quick do hat of the week. Hat of the week is some random creature in front of part of Colorado's flag. And I thought this was going to be our last podcast. So I was like, this is my favorite hat. I'll just wear my favorite hat for the last podcast. But it sounds like you might get to listen to us discuss some more stuff for another couple of weeks yet. So I'll have to think about some more hats. But that's my story on Hike to Hunt, Bill.
I love it. I was going to say the hat looks like a mix between an elk and a red stag.
100%. That's 100% what it is.
Yeah, we'll have to get a how-to tutorial out for Emily and everyone else, how to properly size your tube sock for your phone and how to fix it to your body So Sarah, Kelly, real quick for Sarah, I think we got to fill her in on the whole tube sock thing because she's looking a little confused.
Oh no. I'm too frugal to buy any kind of carrier for my phone that goes on my arm. So in order to track my miles for Hike to Hunt, I got on the Google machine to see what I could DIY, and tube sock was one of the first things that popped up. So you cut off the foot of the sock, and then you just put it on your arm and then roll part of it up so that, you have a little pocket to put your phone in. So that's the tube sock phone holder.
I might have forgotten the rolling part. I'm gonna have to actually Google that.
So then it's not directly adjacent to your skin, it's different.
That's awesome.
Got it.
I was envisioning you just put your phone in you wear a tube sock, tiny
Yeah.
sock, and put your phone in it. Because I've done that before. So.
Also works.
Cool.
I love it. So everyone
Sarah, do
at
you want to
home-
talk to it?
Oh, I was just going to say, everyone at home, get out there, hike, get signed up. If you have elevation, use it. That's where we're at. So, yeah, take it away. Kelly.
Yeah. So the first thing we'll ask Sarah is about her Hike to Hunt, but we're super happy to have Sarah Topp with us today to help me and Emily talk about women in the outdoors, essentially some things about tribes, which would be beyond women in the outdoors, some of our experiences with those things, how we feel women are being portrayed in mainstream hunting media. We can talk about lady deer camps, which is something that is near and dear to my heart right now. But first, Sarah, thanks for being on. Sarah and I have never met before, so nice to meet you in person, or sort of in person. Tell us about your Hike to Hunt so far this summer as a starter.
I have to caveat this that I am not formally participating in any challenges. Okay, so I kind of feel weird about the whole Hike to Hunt challenges type thing, because for me anyway, I'm typically outside doing something active every day, or exercise and go to the gym every day. So it just feels odd for me to participate myself in a challenge for Hike to Hunt, because I'm like, well, I mean, I do this every day, so I don't know. But yes, I go outside, I hike, I take my dogs out. I have a German short hair pointer named Timber that I absolutely adore. If you follow me on social media, that's 99% of what you'll see. So if you don't, you're missing out. She's very entertaining. And yeah, that's my Hike to Hunt.
Yeah. So for the rest of us slackers out there that don't get out and move every day, we need to butts in gear.
Also not trying to say that. It just feels weird to me.
No. So typical introductions on our podcast, we like to talk to you about what's your why for getting outside. I know you're, an upland hunter, you have a bird dog, any other aspects of your outdoor recreation that you want to share with our listeners, and then talk about what sort of brought you to backcountry hunters and anglers. All
right, awesome. My why for getting outside, it's selfish. It's really for me. I like to get outside to feel grounded, to source whatever meat I can for my fridge and freezer, and to feed myself and my family. I like to explore and see new places that you can't drive to by hiking and paddling or whatever that might be. And I also dedicate quite a bit of my time volunteering and in my career aspects to conserve those places, being public lands. And part of that is through being on the board of directors with Michigan Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. I started that role with them in January of 2019, and I'm still heavily participating there. Glad to be on board. And I'm also, I guess they kind of reached out to me with interest in before January of 2019. I knew that they existed, wasn't active in too much aside from going to a couple of their pint nights in Michigan. And my career role at the time with Michigan United Conservation Clubs connected me with people that were on the board. And that's kind of how I made those connections and eventually was invited to be evaluated to be on the board. So glad to be here now. I've hosted quite a few successful events, being pint nights, conservation events, and intro to hunting for women. So I'm feeling really fulfilled with that role.
Yeah, I know. I think you, on one of the podcasts that I've listened to you on, you talked about some of the women-specific outreach or events you've done. So do you want to talk any more about those?
Yeah, it was my first time planning and hosting one, and I think the first Michigan Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Women's Weekend as well. So kind of a dual first there, which was really nice. I think it was really successful, and it definitely confirmed some things that I already knew were issues where women have these barriers of accessing or learning how to recreate and hunt and survival skills, things like that, just simply because they don't feel comfortable in the settings that are available to them to learn from. And when they're given an avenue where they're with other women and ladies to hunt and to learn these skills, it's a much more comfortable setting for a lot of women.
Yeah, that's something Emily and I have talked about in the past, and with some of the other women in BHA here in Wisconsin, was how important peer-to-peer learning is for women in the R3 world or just in any outdoor skills. And those peer-to-peer learning experiences potentially look a little bit different than our traditional learn to hunt experiences, or different than how people who identify as male might try to engage in outdoor activities. So I totally understand what you're saying there. Also involved with a group called Artemis. Can you talk a little bit more about that group?
Yeah, so my official role with Artemis is their leader role. So it's more of a regional kind of political advocate type role for now. And that's fairly new for me. I was offered that role in April of this year, and of course, gladly accepted, and have been trying to be as active as possible. One of those items being the Great American Outdoors Act, which has finally passed the House as of today, which is incredible. So cheers to that, everybody. And I'm really excited to see where that role goes with Artemis. They have other roles like ambassadors with their organization and have been growing pretty progressively, and it's specifically for women in the outdoors.
What is sort of their geographic scope? I mean, I think they have people across the country, although they have a pretty particular focus on the Western states, correct? Or what, can you talk a little bit more about where it is?
They are a program from National Wildlife Federation, and I think they are kind of housed out of Montana for that specific. Marsha Brownlee, the leader of that organization, she's out of Montana, but so they do have a little bit bigger focus in the Western states, but their ambassadors and leaders are growing to pretty much a representation state or nationwide, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, I'm curious about just some more about what their mission is, or why, National Wildlife Federation might have started something like Artemis. What did we recognize, or what was recognized by people in the outdoor industry that led them to thinking we need a particular initiative about getting women outdoors? I mean, and I'm sure that's related sort of to their vision and mission. So if you want to talk any more about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to. I don't think I could do it as much justice as Marsha could, but I think she will be satisfied with this answer in saying that they're filling a very obvious gap of resources and support available for women that are interested in getting into hunting and fishing and other outdoor skills, whether it's just recreation on public lands, and kind of providing those resources by building this network for people to connect to. Hopefully all over the US, and provide workshops for women, spaces where they feel safe and comfortable and welcomed to learn these skills.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to reflect on sort of where those barriers come from for women. Why do those barriers exist? Why do we not feel comfortable exploring some of these opportunities based on the frameworks that we currently have to engage in the outdoors? And I think part of it comes from, the tools that we use, whether it's hunting or whether it's doing, let's say, habitat in the outdoors. Things like firearms, like chainsaws, sort of have this masculine an undertone. And I'm not necessarily sure where that comes from, but I guess I can feel that exists, and I can see how women would be intimidated by those things off the bat. And so the way that we need to approach introducing them to women looks a little bit different than I guess we have potentially in the past. Emily, you and I have sort of talked about this too before, that just the way that we approach teaching people or introducing women to some of these tools just looks a little bit different. And it's just interesting to me to think about the why behind that. Why is it different? What is it about women that makes them fearful? Is it, or intimidated? Is it the way that the media portrays those items? Is it because simply they don't see a lot of women using them? So any thoughts you two have about that would be really interesting.
I've been wanting to chime in, but the weed whacker's in the background, so let me know if that's distracting. One of the things I was looking at on the Artemis website, it's artemis.nwf.org, and I was listening to one of their podcasts with you, Sarah, and I thought it was really cool how they said right away, like, what a sportswoman is, and I'm going to read it because I think it's awesome. But it says, the complete sportswoman can skin a deer, land a burly brown trout, navigate in the wild, and she knows her game commissioners and politician, knows wildlife laws, defends all wildlife, advocates on their behalf, and teaches others these skills. I just thought that was very cool, like outlining. It seemed like somebody or group of women sat down and thought about, like, what does it mean to be a hunter and especially as a woman. I thought that was really neat, that like it's not about going through the motions. It's about that you can actually do those things and feel comfortable doing them, and you can teach others to do them. And I think, yeah, Kelly, what you were talking about is just a lot of the tools that are used for those kinds of things can be intimidating to women, especially firearms or chainsaws and things like that. And I think for me, it was just that, like, I'm trying to think back to when I didn't know how to use those things, because I feel comfortable with them now, and it's sort of hard to think about why I was uncomfortable in the first place. But yeah, I think I just had this idea that they were really dangerous, and that people were telling me my whole life to don't touch those things, stay away from those things, like, you don't know how to use them. And I think that's just I don't know, I'd be interested in hearing your guys' thoughts too. And I just thinking about that, I was just like a big branch fell over our driveway last week with some of those big storms, and my uncle's been storing his new RV at that place, and so I came out with my chainsaw, and it was amazing because I fired her up and right away my uncle, who loves me very much, was like, I don't think that's gonna work. And he was like telling me how to saw the tree. And it's just it's interesting because, like, these are people who love me and who have confidence in me, and it just seemed like sometimes it's a habit, or it just comes out.
I think there's so much subliminal messaging that sort of tells women that they aren't, that their right place is not necessarily doing some of the things that we're talking about. And it's not intentional. It's just that we don't see a lot of images of women hunting independently. We don't see a lot of images of women camping independently in these like really rugged environments. Or if we do, it's sort of these really objectified images of women doing those things, right? the image sort of draws the eye to something about their female body versus what they're doing. A lot of the images of women in mainstream media have them being directed by men. Start looking at some of the images that you see. A lot of times you'll see, men pointing while a woman is shooting, is wing shooting or something like that. A woman taking a direction from a man in the outdoors. And so all of those subliminal messages, I think, really, especially for adult women who've never used any of these things before, sort of tells them that they should be really cautious, or it's just not it's not something that would be natural to them to use. So and there's been some research into stuff like this too. I mean, we know that there's a bias in how females are portrayed in mainstream hunting and fishing media, and what that is doing then, as how that manifests in who is ultimately participating in those activities, is really important. And it is driving certain certain mentalities about what women do outdoors and what men do outdoors. And again, it's not necessarily intentional that we're doing it that way, but just like anything else, representation means everything. And so if women don't see themselves in steel advertisements with chainsaws, doing something really cool, they might not think that they can use a chainsaw. And so that there's so much ground, I think, to be gained in thinking really intentionally about that stuff. And as so many, I think we talked about this on, was it the last episode with Joe, where there's so much hunting media and fishing media and stuff out there right now, so much on social media, so many pictures for people to look at, so many videos for people to watch. And we don't necessarily want these really objectified women to be the only ones that are portraying what women are doing in the outdoors, because that can send this sort of subliminal message about who can do it and who can't, what you have to look like. And I think that also sort of calls on just the differences in biology between males and females, sort of what messages females respond to versus males. We look at each other. We often, women look to each other a lot for guidance and help, and what is appropriate, maybe more so than men. And so again, being really intentional about how we portray women in the outdoor space will manifest in what women try to engage in it.
I was going to ask, because both Kelly and Sarah grew up hunting, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, you did too, right?
Yeah, I grew up hunting from a pretty early age. I think as far as deer hunting goes, I had to express interest to my parents first. Like, I would see my brothers and my dad go off to deer camp in November, and I'd be like, well, I want to go do that. I don't want to sit here and watch them go do the fun outdoor stuff. I want to go too. So once I expressed interest in that, I was able to go with no questions asked, no problems. It was really, they just didn't think I would have an interest initially.
What age did you start going?
My dad included all of my siblings and I on going out, like scouting with him, just to go out into the woods at a pretty young age. I want to say like 4 or 5 years old. So really early. I don't think we knew what was happening or what we were doing. I specifically remember being in charge of carrying the rattling antlers at one point, and I thought it would be really fun to hold them up to my head as we were hiking and wait and see how long it would take my dad to notice. Super effective. Yeah. It was just more fun for us to go, and he was not successful whenever he had us along, of course, but yeah, really young.
Yeah. So did you guys feel like it was, were you worried about using the guns and the bows? And it seems like you both were pretty well, it was just what was around, right? And I assume that you started feeling comfortable with those tools from an early age.
Yeah, your statement kind of resonated earlier when you were saying like you were kind of taught to not touch those things and, be afraid of them. And I think that yes, people should be aware that they're dangerous and be scared of like the harm that they could cause, but not necessarily be intimidated or afraid by learning how to safely operate a chainsaw or safely operate firearms. I think it's good to have that fear of that, yes, they can cause some major harm so that you're always cautious. But I grew up with firearms in the household. Both my parents were in law enforcement for a pretty significant portion of their lives. So firearm safety in general was just a constant topic in the household. And as far as the chainsaw operation, that didn't come for me until my adult years in life.
Were you concerned about the chainsaw when you first started using it?
I mean, I was scared. The most frustrating part for me was starting the chainsaw in the first place. So
Oh, I know.
getting it started. But once I got past the kinks of starting an old, not reliable chainsaw multiple times, I was just always and still am always cautious and analyze whatever I'm going to be cutting and how I'm using that tool and just be safe.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, Bill and Anthony, I mean, so Bill, I know, grew up hunting also, and Anthony, you started as an adult. So what was that? What were those experiences like for you guys? Just thinking about some different tools that just kind of the social construction of did it men versus women and girls versus boys and kind of social constructs were taught. And I think those kinds of tools just are a really cool example of how that's brought out. So I just wanted to hear your guys' side of that too.
Anthony, you can go first.
So my introduction to hunting really actually came in the introduction of firearms. And from the firearms, then, I grew a passion for that. And then that grew into hunting. And it's really helpful to see people who look like me, which is males, especially cis males. I can relate to that. I'm familiar with that. I grew up with that. So I feel comfortable within that. So I can only imagine as a female and what seems to be, at least from what media portrays in the numbers, a male-dominant sport, how that could kind of be a challenge to get into.
So you were jazzed about the firearms right off the bat?
Right off the, well, I wouldn't say right off the bat, but it helped.
Yep, for sure. That's cool.
I still haven't done a chainsaw though, so that's on my bucket list now.
Well, I think Sarah can get you started on chainsaws. You can show her all there is to know about all of the guns you have and the silencers, and you can swap skills at an outdoor thing, chainsaws and suppressed firearms. I think it's got potential as a BHA event.
Sounds like a little bit.
I'm gonna sign up. Yeah, I've loved the idea of this ever since Kelly shared with me about Lady Deer Camp and kind of what her and her group have started with it, the idea behind it, the ethos, the energy. Because for me, growing up as part of quote unquote Deer Camp, it almost like one of the worst things that you could do would be to choose to not hunt with the group, the guys. They would say things like, oh, you can stay home and bake cookies, you can do all this like female domestic, like they kind of like what we're talking about, right? The female place, according to racist, sexist, homophobic old white dudes, is to stay home, not handle weapons, not handle tools, not to do anything quote unquote dangerous or violent. So that was always like the thing, is if I didn't want to go hunting with them, mostly because they were assholes, it was seen as like, oh, you're gonna stay home, you're a wimp, blah 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 blah, and that only made me dislike it more, completely fall out of it. Once my dad got hurt, he kind of left that camp And then with it, obviously, I wasn't around it, so we kind of just disappeared from that world. And it took me a long time to kind of come back to hunting and realize like that shitty experience wasn't hunting. That was just shitty people. So like I don't have a deer camp. I go out with my dad, typically opening weekend. He's been in pretty poor health the last couple of years, so we haven't really been able to hunt as much as I would like. So yeah, my hunting camp is probably the squirrels that are out running around in the morning when I'm out there. But yeah, I love the idea and the energy that kind of behind Lady Deer Camp, behind Artemis, behind this whole pushback saying, hey, women can handle tools, they can be violent, they can handle weaponry, and it's awesome. So that's kind of my experience.
That's a really interesting story, Bill, about, I don't know, a pretty hyper masculine group of hunters. And I think probably not one that it's not, I don't think it's necessarily the majority of, let's just talk about deer camps, but they certainly exist. And so I'll loop this back to why we did Lady Deer Camp. When I was working with some of the students this past winter for Conservation Leaders for Tomorrow, I think I mentored on their hunts. I mentored all females, and several of them had family members that hunted, and several of them said that they were purposely told that they couldn't come on these hunting experiences because it was the guys' thing. And it's just so reminiscent to me that women are not equally being invited. And I didn't necessarily experience that when I was young. Obviously, I mean, I've hunted since I was young, and I've pretty much only hunted with men most of my life. So I was always invited. I never really thought about it until I was older. I do remember before I started hunting, and I would sit in the farmhouse with my grandma while my dad was out hunting and express my interest in hunting. She would talk about how cool it would be, you know, if a young girl could go hunting. And it was never a question with my dad. My dad took me, you know, pretty much as soon as I was old enough to hunt with a license, he would take me. And it wasn't until I was an adult when I started looking around being like, I don't know any other women hunters, especially women deer hunters. And when I started working, you know, when I was working for Wisconsin DNR and just throughout my career now, I met other females that hunt, many of which started hunting as an adult. And we all started recognizing that we were still sort of being told, no, you can't come to these hunting experiences with the guys, even though we were friends in every other way. You know, we would do all kinds of stuff with our guy friends and coworkers, but for whatever reason, some of the hunting stuff we weren't invited to because they were the guy trips. And so some of us finally decided we'd had it with that mentality of not being invited for seemingly no reason. And there was generally an undertone of like, well, you don't hunt as hard as me, which is incorrect. I mean, some of the hardest hunters I know are women. Or well, you can't come because you're not going to like the jokes I make, or you're not going to let me complain about my spouse. I mean, there, you know, at our Lady Deer Camp, there are things said about people's spouses, just like there would be at any other deer camp. Like the whole point was we wanted to have a group gathering where first and foremost women were welcome. We wanted women to come, and we wanted any experience of that they had around hunting. It wasn't really a learn to hunt environment, but if you didn't really know how to hunt, we could pretty much guarantee that somebody would sit with you and go with you and, you know, sort of do the mentoring process. We had people who came who said off the bat, I don't want to hunt at all. I just want to come for the camaraderie, and I'll help clean deer if we get any, and I'll help cook meals. Like I'll do that whole thing. Everybody just wanted to be a part of that community, that tribe of the deer camp experience that I think the guys love about deer camp, right? I mean, they just want to go and have a good time. And that's what we wanted to. And hunting was the activity that ultimately brought us together to do that. And I'm really glad hunting was that activity. I mean, it's something that's super important to me and that I wanted to share with these other women that weren't necessarily getting to share it with a lot of other people. We deer hunt a lot alone, especially, I mean, as a bow hunter, I deer hunt a lot alone. But being able to deer hunt sort of as a team was really fun. We sort of would organize each other every day that we would go out, whether it was doing deer drives or whether we were going to put people in different spots where they would ultimately sit alone with another person. It felt like we were hunting as a team, and it allowed us to, again, share, some of this knowledge and mentorship with people who were less comfortable. All of that developed ultimately out of the fact that women are not necessarily equally invited into the hunting space. They're not equally invited into deer camps. It's really interesting, Bill, that you had this experience where even the men weren't equally invited because they were showing some sort of perhaps feminine characteristic. How bizarre is that? So what's sort of funny to me is that when people ask me about Lady Deer Camp, they're like, that's really cool. That's really cool. And it is really cool. It's also really interesting that you think it's cool because that tells me that it's not happening very often, that we don't have a lot of these, specifically women groups in deer hunting or in probably any kind of hunting, but I think especially in deer hunting, we don't have specifically groups of women getting together to do that activity. And that's really telling. I mean, I sort of wish it wasn't that way. I wish we had all kinds of lady deer camps that were telling their stories. And I hope people hear ours and say, yeah, I'm going to start asking my lady friends to come do this, and share that tribe. I mean, because that's what's ultimately going to keep us all as deer hunters. So that's our lady deer camp story, Bill. You've been asking me about it for a while, but I think it touches on a lot of the things that we've touched on throughout the podcast: community, tribes, traditions, meeting people where they're at in their outdoor experience, providing an inclusive environment for everybody to participate, providing an environment where it's not just about getting people a firearm so that they can go shoot a deer. They can, bringing everybody into a space where they can feel like they're a part of something. And ultimately the activity that brings you together is hunting. But there's so much more than that. So that was a long spiel about Lady Deer Camp, but if anybody else wants to chime in here about their own tribes of, their own groups of people that they like to hunt with, or if they've formed groups of women that get to do these things together, sort of as a result of recognizing that there are barriers for women to be doing these things. And on top of it, we aren't necessarily equally invited to do them with men. Go for it.
I just wanted to ask Kelly, is that supported through the Wisconsin chapter for backcountry hunters and anglers, or is that just totally on your own thing?
It was totally on our own. A couple of the ladies that I worked with, we all had a connection to each other to begin with. We had all worked for the department at one time. And some of us live closer to others than some of us live close and some of us live further away. For the most part, we're all in Wisconsin. And it was just a small group of us where we just had this idea one year where we said, we need to deer hunt together. We don't deer hunt together. And it was sort of fresh off of being denied to go with some guys to do deer hunting. And it just sort of blossomed into this really cool thing now that we do that. I hope it's an annual tradition for a long time. We've done it twice, and I don't see us stopping. And talked to a lot of other people about it. Just, I guess people are interested in like what the logistics, or or how do you do this? And I think it's you find your community and you just do it. I mean, you commit to putting in the time, to sharing the tools. I mean, we had people who didn't have firearms that needed some, so other people stepped in and brought firearms. We all shared food. We tried to focus on predominantly eating game meat the entire time that we were together, but everybody signs up and brings something. And I think there was also a lot of mutual understanding that you could hunt as aggressively as you wanted to, or you could not hunt at all. And so that to me is what's maybe a little bit different than the learn to hunt environment. So not that anybody has to do, once they, do the initial parts of the learn to hunt, do they have to complete it? Do they have to, actually go on the hunt? We want them to. But it just provided this really low key environment for people to participate really however they wanted to. And yeah, again, if there were organizations that sort of wanted to sponsor those spaces for people that, like, let's say you don't know a lot of female hunters. Obviously, I mean, I just said most people don't. I was lucky that I found this group of people that I knew. But if you don't have a group like that, I think there is certainly space for a group like BHA or Pheasants Forever or Wisconsin DNR to sort of facilitate those groups getting together and forming, especially because, like we just said, women don't always know other women hunters, especially on the magnitude that we have. We have about a dozen of us that come now. So that's a pretty big group. It's almost all the women hunters that I am friends with for the most part that live in this state.
That's awesome. Yeah, I asked because for my event, it was hosted with backcountry hunters and anglers for the Michigan chapter. So, but I don't know what it's like for each individual state chapter. For me, it was expressing interest as a board member saying, hey, I'd really like to host a women's event. Do you think we could have support for that? And it was an easy yes. So maybe that just comes from the Wisconsin board members for the chapter to kind of formally host something. But I think there's definitely avenues for support there in the future.
I feel like, yeah, Wisconsin BHA has been super supportive of women's events and kicking things off. And Liz Baker, she's, and Kelly and a couple other folks just have been trying to spearhead some things. And Sarah, did you have good, was it hard to gather up interest in meetings for women specifically, or what did that look like for you when you started kicking those off?
It was not difficult at all. So like I said, I posted just the one so far. That was July, actually this weekend in July of last year, exactly. We hosted it in the central northern Lower Peninsula, which is Grayling, Michigan, and kind of a rural area. And I expected there to be a lot of participants from that area to sign up, but they signed up from statewide and spots filled up really, really fast. I think we capped it at 10 participants, and we were originally going to host for 20, and we got like 40 people signing up interested. So yeah, it didn't seem to matter where we hosted the location in the state. We got people that were interested from all regions of the state, willing to travel 3.5 to 4 hours to go to an event. So that's awesome. A lot. Yeah.
What did you do during your event? I've heard a lot of different types of events for women, and the BOW program, Becoming an Outdoors Woman, started at UW-Stevens Point in Wisconsin. So I think they definitely have a niche, but yeah, just wondering what kinds of programs you're running with BHA specifically.
Yeah, so for that one, we titled it as a cast and blast just for lack of other creativity. But we focused on an intro to fly fishing, including the actual getting into the river, getting waders, connecting with guides. We had some great resources there, local to Michigan. And each lady walked away with their own fly rod setup that was donated through the organization. So that was really cool, so that they can continue to pursue that afterwards. We participated part of the event, a full day actually, at one of the local sportsmen's clubs using their shooting range. We had 5-stand and trap, and they got an introduction to shooting sporting clays if they wanted to. Each woman for this event brought their own shotgun or borrowed from a friend to bring one. So that was cool. And we just had a survey ahead of time to gauge what needs there were, if people needed shotguns provided, if they had experience in that, if they needed fly fishing gear provided. So that helped us plan and prepare ahead of time. And obviously the fly casting intro was pretty extensive, and then getting out into the river for a session Nobody caught any fish, but they had a lot of fun casting and kind of learning to read the river, and connected with some great other ladies that they can pursue those things with afterwards.
That's awesome. Very cool.
I'm really amazed at how you guys are controlling the narrative. You guys are changing the narrative from it being a male dominant kind of view of women in the sport, and how you guys are saying, we're the same. That's really amazing. So kudos to you guys for that.
Thank you. I guess on that, the one thing that comes to mind is I got invited last fall to go deer hunting with one of my really good friends that actually formally got me into upland bird hunting. His name is Brent Chambers, and his family, he invited me with his deer camp buddies that he's been going to deer camp for years and years now. He just welcomed me and invited me to go to his deer camp in the fall for firearm opening season here in Michigan. And at first, my initial thought was, oh, there's a couple other guys. Like, are they going to feel weird if there's a woman around? They're going to feel weird or feel like they're set back by having a woman at their deer camp. But those thoughts went away immediately because I know and trust this person very well. And it was an incredible experience. I got my first public land buck, and it was successful and just awesome to hang out with them and feel totally welcomed. I know that's not something that's accessible for all women, and not something that all women are interested in for that matter, but those opportunities do exist, and it was really cool to participate in that.
For males like me, Will, and Ryan, how do we become allies to help women enter into the sport?
The biggest thing I would say, just be inclusive. Like, I'm not assuming that anyone has these walls, but try not to have those walls of, well, my girlfriend or my friend that's a girl, or my sister or family member that's a girl, like they can't come because they're female and it'll throw off the group. Like, just try to be as open and welcoming as possible. If someone expresses interest, welcome them.
Yeah, I was gonna just share a similar experience that like when I first started hunting, I think I had just like a lot of personal barriers, especially about the just about hunting being male dominated, and just like feeling like every male hunter I talked to felt like I wasn't really that into it or something. But just some of the just interesting conversations I've had as I've stuck with it is like my husband, he always went to a bow hunt camp called Camperama with all of his friends. And when I first started hunting, I was like, well, why can't I go? Why can't I go? And he was like, well, you're not bow hunting yet. Like, you can't. I don't know. I had never shot a bow or anything like that. And then, so it just led to some really good discussions between the two of us, I don't think that a lot of the men I talked to were actively trying to be exclusive. And I don't, like in that case, it was kind of a technicality. Like I don't know. And I think it's interesting too. I'm just throwing these kinds of thoughts out there for discussion, but I think a lot of hunt camps or a lot of hunting that men do, like, is time they get to spend together. So it was really hard for me to navigate, like, well, I get to spend time with my friends. When does Jake get to spend time with his friends? And what do we do in those different scenarios? And so I think it's helpful to think about it from that perspective as well. And I think it gets tricky when, like, if you have a group of guy friends and all they do is hunt, and you have a group of girlfriends and all they do is, I don't know, something else. But so what it's come to though is just having, like, we hunt so much now that it's not a big deal if I don't go to every gathering, I guess. And I definitely, as I've grown in skill and things like that, a lot of new opportunities have opened up to me. So I went to Camp Rama last year because I started bow hunting, and it was just like totally fine. But I think that I was just throwing those out because I think those kinds of things were hard for me to navigate when I first started, and I had all these like preconceived notions in my head about how people were judging me and why they thought I wanted to hunt and why I could participate in some things and why not others. And so I don't know, it was definitely an evolution of being able to feel comfortable in groups of only men, but also, I don't know, just being comfortable with hunting in general on my own. And I think as my confidence in myself increased, I think my confidence in being a part of those groups also increased as well. I don't know. I don't know if you guys have had similar experiences to that.
Let me say too that, like, I've had many males in my life that have welcomed me to hunt with them, and that I super enjoy hunting with. And without really strong men that thought that a young girl could go hunting with them and that it was no big deal, I don't know if I would be hunting. And so there, total props to the men who did start me out early and never ever made me think that was odd. Like I said, it wasn't until I was an adult where I started looking around and being like, oh, I don't know any other female hunters. It just never really occurred to me. And so we're all part of the solution, right? I mean, we can't just rely on the females to mentor the new female hunters. We need strong male mentors to mentor females too. We just need to be able to recognize that might not work for all the new female hunters that we're trying to bring into the space. They might prefer being mentored by a female, and we need to respect that. I think people underestimate the impact of small things that we say to each other when we talk about hunting. And Sarah, I just see you added something like this to the notes. Like when you see a female out hunting and you immediately ask them, do they have some sort of male companion with them? Or are you with your dad? Or, oh, you want to spend time with your boyfriend, so this is why you're doing this. All of those things, again, add to this subliminal messaging that women do not belong outside hunting. Sort of like I was trying to get at with the media portrayal of pictures. And so I'm not saying nitpick every single thing you ever say to a lady when you see her in the field, but just catch yourself when you're starting to think those things. And it was something that we faced when we were talking about Lady Deer Camp. Like people were like, oh, so you're, having pillow fights, or are you really hunting when you go? And it was like, yeah, we're hunting. Like that's what we're here to do. I mean, to some extent, that's what we're here to do. And it just made me wonder if the guys go around asking each other those questions. Do you guys go around asking each other at your camp, or are you really hunting at your camp? I don't know if that exists. And so I know for the most part, or all of it, my guy friends are joking when they say that. I mean, I had a lot of those comments from guy friends, but to think that maybe they would be saying that to somebody they didn't know as well, or if they really were going to say no to a new female hunter that just wants to try, how much of an impact that's making on our sport is probably pretty significant. And so especially if you're a male who's being approached by a female who's in particular new and wants to try something and is asking you, it's already taking them probably a fair amount of courage to go ask a male to do something with them, potentially one-on-one. And if you say no to them, there might be many reasons why. And I would just challenge you to think about, is the reason why simply because they're a female? And why would that be the reason that you say no if we're all just hunters? So to me, Anthony, we just lost Emily. That's to me the biggest way to be an ally is just really challenge. And females can do this too. I mean, I think females also, they give themselves a lot of reasons why they can't. do things, and we should challenge each other about why those thoughts occur. And we certainly, project stereotypes on male hunters all the time. There's Emily. And so as female hunters or female people in the outdoors, we should also challenge our own thinking processes of how we might stereotype men. It just so happens that there's so many men in the outdoor space that most of the stereotypes are against women. So, Bill, you haven't said much. What do you think?
I'm enjoying the conversation. I've been looking forward to this podcast. I love the three of you. I know Ryan's comment. I'll paraphrase, but so as a father, he's got daughters, and he wants them growing up comfortable in the outdoor space, and his big fear, his concern is about role models and leadership, and like you're talking, having that female role available. We all know Ryan's doing a great job, and his partner's doing a great job. They're great parents for their children, but having that other, right, like that's the piece that's so important to childhood development, is having that person other than your parents as a role model. So having the three of you in the outdoor space as people they can look up to going forward is huge. So no, I'm enjoying the ride right now. It's nice to be able to just listen and absorb and not have to talk. So appreciate what the three of you are sharing with everyone. I just saw Sarah's note in here about her experience, and I don't know if you're comfortable sharing that, Sarah. And I just shared a post on Facebook today about a male hunter coming out to his hunting group and kind of getting a bunch of flack for being gay. And so for me, I'm thinking going forward, it's like, well, should I almost feel like I should start saying I have a male partner or something, because I've never been asked, hey, where's your significant other in the woods? And I've been lost, like seriously lost, and come out on the trail where there's a person, where someone probably should be asking me where my supervisor is at some point. But no, I think it's dumb that's happening, that people are going to those comments like, where's your boyfriend, or you're only doing it because of your boyfriend. I think that just sucks, and that's why we're having this conversation. Hopefully it ignites a fire for some people, and kind of slaps other people on the back of the head to get better into the future.
Yeah, and I'm comfortable sharing that story. A little background on what Bill's talking about there is, I was upland hunting by myself with my bird dog Timber through the Grayling State Forest, and wandering through some pretty thick cover, and came out on a 2-track, and there was a guy setting up his camp spot with an RV. Unfortunately, a middle-aged white guy, which seems to be kind of the the general group that says comments like this. He came up to me, he's like, "Oh, where's your boyfriend? You're out here by yourself?" And I didn't really have a response right away. At first, I was kind of just annoyed by that, because it's been a pretty common question if I'm doing anything that's considered to be a masculine activity or skill by myself. And then I also had to process in my brain, like, okay, that's kind of a big question for me, because at the time I had a girlfriend, and was like, well, do I disclose that I'm dating? I have a girlfriend, so no, I don't have a boyfriend. And like, secondly, I don't need to be out here with a boyfriend or a significant other to hunt by myself. So it took a few moments to process that, and instead of being angry and saying something naive, I just simply said, no, I actually really enjoy hunting by myself, and I'm out here alone. And we ended up having a pretty decent conversation about how I myself got into hunting and how I trained my bird dog instead of how my boyfriend trained it. So it ended up being okay, but I've had a few interactions like that where it's just frustrating to have that be your first reading with somebody else out in the woods.
Yeah, and that's a prime example, especially since it sounds like it turned out fairly positive for you. Like, the guy seemed like a decent person in your brief interaction. Is that the initial interaction with you have with someone can sort of immediately set the tone. And so a lot of what is said, things like, where's your boyfriend, is not intentionally a put down or intentionally supposed to remind you that you are a female in this outdoor space, but it has that impact, right? It sets us back and it makes us think, oh, am I welcome here or not? And so the more we can stop ourselves before we say those things, the more welcoming the atmosphere is. It's so powerful. I mean, it's like interpersonal relations 101, right? And applying it to being outside, picking your words more carefully so that it automatically sort of sets this and creates this environment of being welcoming. One thing we haven't necessarily touched on that maybe we can do a little bit before we end is, so we've talked a lot about female portrayals in hunting media, and we sort of got to, maybe women have been objectified in hunting media. One thing I think about is how long has that been the case? In the millions of years that humans have been hunters, has it always been a male-dominated activity? And, depending on where you are in the world, women have forever been a very active part of hunting to provide food for their families, and probably even until recent history, even as in pioneer days, as people moved west, we had women very active in hunting. Certainly, women in indigenous cultures have been active in hunting for a very long time, and so it's sort of this fairly recent phenomenon that we have this dichotomy of like women stay home and don't hunt and don't really have any part of it. Don't want to have any part of your harvest, and then when they do, they're portrayed in sort of this really objectified way of, if you're going to be a part of hunting, you probably want pink on your camo, and you're probably, going to want really tight fitting clothing that actually is not functional in the field. All of these things are a relatively new phenomenon. And this sort of touches on, what Ryan was telling us before is, what does that tell young people that, his children and ultimately all women? Again, this portrayal of they do or don't belong is very strong, and it's probably a relatively new phenomenon. And look at, we were just talking about before we started, Artemis is, we're talking about really historical figures, female figures that were hunters, and it has been that way in human civilization for a very long time. So I think one thing that we could do to do better is share our own pictures of what a modern day female looks like in the field. Show, Sarah obviously is doing it. She loves showing pictures of timber and her out hunting. I mean, you are a modern day female hunter. I'm a modern day female hunter. As much as we can share that image, so people like Ryan's children can see, you don't have to be wearing, maybe Sarah, you like to wear the pink camo, but no, right? No, I mean, as much as we can show that we need the same functional tools that the guys get to have. We don't need to be objectified as women when we show these pictures. These are things that can really help us advance women participation.
I can't tell you how much I despise pink on anything hunting related.
Right.
Or blue for that matter, because I absolutely love the light color blue. It's one of my favorite colors. It's also one of the colors that deer can see the best. So why would we put that on our camouflage clothing?
Why do women need special colors on their camouflage? Men, these are the things that subliminally tell us we are different. We are put in a different space. And I know I do not speak for all women, for sure. 100% do not speak for all women. Some women like that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can like that. You can embrace that part of you being feminine, because that's you controlling. You're taking the objectification out of it. You're empowered as a woman to have something that in your hunting clothing that makes you feel feminine. Like I get that. It's another part of this objectification conversation is that there are aspects of how females are portrayed that we might actually like as women. There are times when we like to be portrayed as feminine in the field, and that doesn't make us objectified. That might make us empowered. Objectification stems from somebody has to objectify you. They are making you into an object rather than the person that you are. And so it's okay for us to own feminine parts of us in the field and want clothing that actually fits, and yes, might show that you have a feminine figure, but for that, the identifying factor of us rather than being a hunter, generally not okay. At least it's not okay to me. That's not what I want to be known for. I want to be known as a female hunter that has functional clothing, not showing off some part of my physique that generally caters towards the majority of the participants in the hunting space.
I absolutely agree. Couldn't agree more. And I'm going to do a shameless plug for First Light Hunting Apparel. I have no association with them whatsoever other than I own their gear, and I absolutely love it. No pink, no difference from the men's other than a women's specific fit. And it's just incredible. It's the best gear that I've owned. So if you guys aren't familiar with it and you're looking for gear that fits women, that's your go-to, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. That was one of the impetuses behind the last Pine Night BHA had in Wisconsin, was that one at Delta. And we tried to do that gear swap. And that started, Emily, you were part of that conversation, right? That sort of started because we, as a group of women, were like, it would be really cool to share information about equipment that we like as women. And if women have things that they want to share with each other, even if it is hand-me-down guy stuff, whatever. If it is hand-me-down guy stuff, that's great. Like, if that helps get women outside, or anybody, but if it takes getting some hand-me-down guy stuff for a lady to get outside, like, that's awesome. That was sort of why we wanted to do that, and I hope we keep doing it. It did. I mean, I learned a bunch about tree saddles there. That was really cool. And I hope that as more women come to those events, we can talk to each other about what you just said, Sarah, like brands that we love that are really functional clothing that maybe don't have pink and blue on them. I love that. So we're starting to run up probably in about our hour here. So are there other things?
Yeah. So you guys are all active on social media. I was wondering, what is a hashtag that someone could, follow up on women hunters? You guys have a hashtag?
Artemis Sportswoman is a great one.
All right.
I've looked at a couple hashtags actually, and I think it's like, I forgot if this was in the notes or not, but like the word huntress or girls who hunt, or sometimes like I'll be looking for a picture of a woman hunting, so I'll type in like, I don't know, something that would seem like a generic term, and then I get lots of pictures of girls in like bikinis shooting a bow and stuff like that. So that's actually an interesting question, Anthony, that I think I tend to use the hashtag woman the hunter or something like that. I don't know, just something that when I search, it doesn't come up with something that's not me.
I think it's hilarious, Anthony, that you think I'm active on social media, because I'm actively not on social media. But so I don't have a good answer, but I would think Artemis would be a really good one that, that's got some brand recognition right now that hopefully would have some good content behind it. But it's a good question. And the huntress thing, like Emily said, is, I think it's, and I don't know if Sarah, if it was you or Bill that sent out that article about sort of the controversy behind that term. And that's exactly, like, as soon as I haven't used it as a hashtag for obvious reasons, and I haven't looked for it, but as soon as that was brought up, I was like, oh, I bet you it's exactly what Emily described. Like, and sure enough. And those are the sort of images that I think we just have questions about. And sort of there's this, again, this fine line between who's doing the objectification. Like, if a woman wants to shoot her bow in her bikini, is that any different than a man posting a picture, shirtless, shooting his bow just because? I don't have a good answer for that. I think it depends on what the intent was. And again, is there some level of objectification happening? Those are always my questions. And again, I'll say that I don't speak for all women. So I know that I probably wouldn't post a picture like that. And I'm not, and I don't want women to think that the only content that is consumable is them being in non-hunting clothing, shooting a bow. Is sort of my answer.
I couldn't agree with that more. And when I portray photos and images of me or me hunting with my dog or just me hunting deer or whatever else it may be, or fishing for that matter, I try my best to think about that even, and just think about how I'm going to portray that to people that might not be hunters or anglers yet, and see like what that best representation might be, so that people can see other people that look like them doing the things that they might be interested in, whether that's me in my baggy hunting clothes or just a photo of like a tail fin of a fish, for example. There's different ways to portray that and say, yeah, women do these things too, and it's not me in a bikini. So
it's really interesting that it's even a thing that we talk about, right? I mean, it's very representative of just the dichotomy between men and women in our culture. We always talk about what women are wearing, and women professionals have to think a lot more about what they're wearing generally than men do. And so even in the hunting space, we think a lot more about what we're wearing and how we're being portrayed. And it's just, I mean, that's a barrier for women entry, right? I mean, it shouldn't have to think about that. And the fact that we do makes it hard, makes it more complex and complicated. And at having these conversations, I hope help see both sides of it and empower people to not feel like they have to fit into a box in order to be a lady out there hunting and fishing.
I think Artemis is a great one though. And I was wondering, Sarah, can you explain where the name Artemis came from?
yeah, so I can't do it the full justice, but it is from the Greek mythology of like Artemis as the goddess. I know that particular goddess had a hunting kind of background, and that's the name that they settled on for Artemis Sportswoman organization of National Wildlife Federation. And they do have an Artemis podcast where they explain the full story of why they chose that name. So I encourage you to check that out because it will describe it much better than I just did.
Yeah, I think it stems a lot. I think the name Artemis, or the idea of Artemis, stems a lot from the idea that there aren't very many role models for women who hunt, and that was why I was so interested that Artemis outlined exactly what they thought or what they want to present in a woman hunter. And I think Artemis is often just a figure who's looked to because she's not just a hunter, but she's also a life giver. And so a lot of something I just read about is this convergence of hunting and like ecofeminism. And so it's been interesting. Ecofeminism came out in the 70s, but it basically like equated women experiencing violence to environmental violence. And so like rape and domestic violence and things like that in the 70s are when the environmental movement came about. And so I think it was just this something that people connected, and I can definitely see how that came about, but I can also see how that could be detrimental to the idea of women hunting and kind of reinforcing the idea that women shouldn't be violent, they shouldn't hunt, and just the idea that hunting is hurting and hunting is hurting the environment. And so I know that was just a really big movement, and a lot of that has transferred over into the 21st century. And so Artemis is this idea of a woman who's empowered. She hunts. She's also the goddess of birth and life, and so she really brings it full circle. And she is a good role model for somebody who's connected to the environment and cognizant of all of those things, and somebody who's not one-sided. So I really like the idea of Artemis. I think that's very cool that NWF took that and made it into something and that you're involved.
Thank you. You explained that and elaborated on it beautifully. And yeah, I'm honored to be involved in the seemingly small capacity that I am. But, things like this will spread outreach, and other people like us will get involved and keep growing.
This has been super fun, as it always is. I want to thank Sarah for being our guest today. I also want to thank Bill and Anthony, and I'm always really hesitant to sound like I'm patronizing, but I think it is really important for when we have conversations like this to recognize that when we have really receptive male listeners, how awesome that is and how much we appreciate that. It makes me feel really good about what we can do moving forward. It's so very important to be able to have these open conversations, and I hope that myself and Emily and Sarah serve the same to you guys when you want to have important conversations about how we better work together to create an equitable space for hunting. So thanks for that. Bill, you always want us to leave with some sort of what can we do message, and I know we already talked about we sort of talked about how we can be better allies, but is there anything else, Bill, that you're hoping we can sneak in as our parting messages for this episode?
That's going to be up to the three of you. I will leave a parting message. Well, and thank you and you're welcome for the kind words. I love this episode a lot. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Sarah, you're an awesome human being. Keep lifting heavy barbells. Keep hunting, shooting guns, training your dog. The world needs more of that. My parting message is just going to go out to other white dudes in the hunting space, and that's maybe some of us should shut up more and listen a bit more. There's other perspectives than our own, and I think a lot of us get too busy trying to justify our position instead of listening to other people's perspectives and seeing the truth in them. So that's what I'm going to end with. Thanks for hosting, Kelly and Emily.
Around the horn here for me would be Anthony next. Anthony, any other parting messages?
Funny, this unmute ain't working. No, yeah, I definitely second what Bill said, especially to Black and Brown communities, to encourage our youth, especially to explore new opportunities, new ventures.
100%. Emily, you are next.
I'm trying to think of like a solid closing thought, and I think for me, I've run into a lot of support for getting into hunting, and I think that speaks a lot to, I don't know, just the friends that we have and the passion they have for being outside and new generations and things like that. But yeah, I think it's important to have support. I'm gonna leave it with that. I think that we wouldn't be where we are without it.
Miss Sarah.
I guess I would say, kind of to follow up on that, Emily, is like offer that support back. I grew up obviously learning a lot of the skills as far as deer hunting and fishing. Was very fortunate to have that support growing up. Got into other avenues of hunting on my own with help of friends that are really, really close to me now. And I dedicate a pretty good amount of time to offer that back wherever I can. So if you don't have the time to offer it back, that's completely reasonable and understandable. Just try to connect people that are interested with friends that you have that can offer that time. I think that's the biggest part in keeping the next generations engaged and involved, is offering them the avenues to get involved.
Yeah. My final thoughts are that people like Sarah and Emily and you, Bill and Anthony, are inspiring me so much because you give back so much to what we hold dear. I mean, Sarah, your Women's Weekend is just, it's inspiring to me. You give so much of your time to people you don't even know, because you recognize that there are obstacles that we didn't necessarily have to deal with when we were being introduced that other people have, and that it's so important to you to be able to support those people through those obstacles. That's so very inspiring. And my women tribe of hunters inspires me all the time. So if they're out in the podcast world listening, I hope they hear that message. That's, to me, what I've said it before and I'll say it again, what keeps me coming back to hunting, and hopefully will keep me hunting for a very long time, is this group of people that I've surrounded myself with that is supportive of it, that we get to have these really complex conversations about. I asked so many of them about, what should I talk about on this episode? You know, what kind of messages do you want people to hear? And we all just want to be invited to the table. And so invited to the table that is outdoor recreation. And I would close with, my table's open to everybody all the time. And I hope we can bring that environment forward through these conversations. So awesome episode, gang. Podcast world, thanks for checking us out. What is the other thing we're supposed to say, Bill? Podcast and Blast, Tuesdays. Yeah?
Boom. Every other Tuesday. All right, we're out.